embarrassment.
It's quite remarkable how quickly John Cleese has gone from comedy hero to absolute weirdo. You know, some famous people must see Graham Linehan and Johnny Rotten and think to themselves, you know what, I don't want to end up like them when I'm older. But John Cleese clearly didn't get the memo, did he? John Cleese whinges and whines about everything, blaming everybody else for problems that most people don't perceive as problems. According to him, we live in a world of censorship where cancel culture is a real threat and free speech is curtailed by the woke. John Cleese has been appearing on TV, radio and podcasts for years, moaning about being silenced. Sometimes millions and millions of people see his messages about how he's being silenced. Sometimes him saying, "I've been silenced," makes newspaper headlines. Often him saying he's being silenced is discussed endlessly on Twitter, despite no one being able to hear him because he's been silenced. And it's all the snowflakes' fault for this, apparently. In fact, when John Cleese spoke to a BBC journalist about him being silenced in 2021, she asked John a question that he didn't like, and he took great offence at her free speech, and he put in a complaint about her, effectively trying to cancel her and silence her. And remember, this is all the snowflakes' fault, apparently. So with all that in mind, it's no surprise that John Cleese has been offered a GB News show. Way back in October 2022, he was told that he's going to have a show there. And despite the 4-month gap since that announcement, we're told he's still on board this potential gravy train. Talking of which, right, here is an interview John Cleese had on GB News just last week, appearing alongside Dan Wootton, another man who loves free speech. He absolutely treasures free speech. To him, free speech is sacred. Dan Wootton, a man who tells Meghan and Harry to stop talking, stop making TV shows, stop writing books, and go away forever because they offend him so much. The irony being that if they did disappear forever, so would Dan Wootton's entire career. GB News would dump him instantly, the Daily Mail would soon do that as well, and it would all be the snowflakes' fault, apparently. Now, this interview from GB News is entitled, "I Won't Allow the BBC to Screen the New Fawlty Towers."
John Cleese, welcome to GB News. It feels great saying that. I'm very excited.
Well, I'm excited because I'm doing this show with you.
If I had £1 million, right, I would, without hesitation, bet all that money, every single penny, on the fact that this totally original show on GB News is exactly the same as all other shows on GB News. In fact, I think John Cleese's content will be the same as every grifter's YouTube video as well. His content will be the same as every grifter's podcast, every grifter's newspaper articles. Everything they've ever done and everything they ever will do is the same because GB News viewers will not stand for presenters that don't pander to them.
I've been working with a couple of guys on it, and the whole idea of being able to create a show from scratch without anyone looking over our shoulders. I mean, I wouldn't get an offer like this anywhere else on the planet.
I wouldn't be offered this opportunity anywhere else. If a grifter is not standing on a stage or in front of a camera or in front of a microphone pretending that he or she has no free speech, broadcasting that message to millions of people, or in the case of GB News, about 5 people, right? If you don't have that particular thing going on, your audience will leave in their droves, okay? It doesn't matter how many of your audience you can fit in the back of a Mini, all those people will go if you don't pander to them. They will effectively cancel you. If you deviate away from the gammon template, the gammon playbook, these people will be upset. Now, granted, they already are upset about everything, but you want them to be upset about fictional scenarios that you've come up with, right? Things that aren't important. You want them to be angry about people who aren't actually a threat, rather than being angry at you. Specifically, you. I wouldn't be offered this opportunity anywhere else.
I wouldn't get an offer like this anywhere else on the planet. It's extraordinary. And I'm really looking forward to it because I think that there are so many cliches in ordinary television. It would be nice just to try and avoid those, just as a start.
Ring, 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 ring. Hello, is that Mr. Cleese? I'm a random TV executive and I would like you to create something new and original and cutting edge for us. Oh, hello. Yes, well, I've got some great news for you. I have a great idea for a TV show. In fact, I think it's something that will do really, really well on GB News. Actually, we're a bit busy at the moment. Our schedule is actually quite full. There's no room for anyone else. In fact, I thought I was phoning John Cheese. I must have called you in error. Bye.
Because I think that there are so many cliches in ordinary television. It would be nice just to try and avoid those, just as a start.
He says, I want to avoid ordinary television. Translation, I've always wondered what it'd be like to only have 7 viewers. Who do you think you are, John Cleese? Me? You never have this crown, honestly.
I have no editorial interference from management in my show. They let me do what I want to do, and you wouldn't get that in any other broadcaster in the UK.
No. It's a sort of trust that we had when we started Monty Python. We went in to see Michael Mills, who was the head of Light Entertainment. We're going to do a humorous show with comedy intended to make people laugh. And after about a minute, he looked at us and shrugged and said, well, go away and make 13 programs.
My goodness.
No one in the history of television has trusted a group like that. And of course, a lot of people at the BBC hated it. I mean, absolutely hated it. He bumped into the director in the elevator and he said, what is this awful show? Is it supposed to be funny? But, you know, if you actually let people create and have new ideas instead of sort of, what do they call them? That kind of parenting. What is it? Hovercraft painting? No.
Yes.
Helicopter parenting.
Bit of a worry there that he did mention the word helicopter. It makes you wonder if that's a preview of his one joke from his forthcoming GB News show. Interestingly, Attack Helicopter Parenting is, of course, the Gammon's one and only and best joke about having a trans parent.
You have been on the front pages of all of the newspapers all week because of your decision.
Well, it was a slow news week.
It must have been, but no.
It must be a slow news week. Yeah, I mean, that is literally why GB News are covering this story. I mean, unless Harry and Meghan are on holiday or something and you just need content pronto. Yeah.
This is huge news, though, John. Fawlty Towers, is it really true? Is it coming back with you as Basil?
Yes, it is, but in a very, very different form. You see, I mean, if you do a sequel, it, first of all, is interesting, and secondly, does not rely upon, of course, Manuel, dear Andy Sachs, who's not with us anymore, and Prue Scales, as is generally known as difficulty remembering stuff now. And certainly almost everyone else is dead, because when I look at old clips now, all these wonderful English character actors who aren't with us anymore. And suddenly we thought, well, if the only continuing character is Basil, we thought, but where? And we thought, no, not in a small English town, much more fun and much more different if it's, say, a Caribbean island or something like that, with a small Bijou hotel, but with a few very rich people coming to stay.
Oh, that is going to be brilliant. A bit of a White Lotus vibe.
Well, you know, that's what my wife was saying to me yesterday. Because if you put it in the Caribbean, it becomes very, very multiracial. And so you can bring lots of different people together.
Okay, he's talking about the cast being more multiracial. Now, if the cast is largely, quote, multiracial, that means technically they're all mixed race. Right? What John Cleese means to say is the cast are made up of multiple races, right? Now, you might think that's a small point, but it actually is quite a big point and one worth making. And bearing in mind, the YouTube video that I am making a commentary about is called I Won't Allow the BBC to Screen the New Fawlty Towers, right? We can safely assume at this stage that his reasoning follows his current grift, okay? That you can't make programmes like what he's proposing on the BBC anymore. However, GB News viewers' perception of the BBC is that it's too multiracial, to use John Cleese's words. For some reason, and we can never pinpoint why, GB News viewers don't like it when brown actors take roles that white actors once had, or gay actors are given roles that were previously given to straight actors. It's impossible to work out why they don't like this. Surely, no conclusion can be drawn from them taking offence at non-straight and non-white actors getting work on TV. And here, John Cleese is making a show where the cast is, to use his words, multiracial, and he's claiming that that scenario could never happen on the BBC. Furthermore, his new fan base are silent that his show is multiracial, a thing they traditionally hate.
Now, look, John, you're annoying all the right people with this announcement.
Good. Who am I annoying?
Well, can I tell you what The Guardian said about the return of your show? I think, by the way, the greatest TV show ever made.
Oh, it's the best TV programme ever made. Can you just bend over a little bit more, John Cleese, so I can get my tongue further up your 83-year-old arsehole?
They said, an anti-woke nightmare. Why the Fawlty Towers remake is a truly nauseating idea.
Yes, well, they obviously know better than I do what's going to be in it.
Obviously, you have had a few words to say about the BBC over recent years.
Yes.
Would you consider doing this version of Fawlty Towers, this sequel with the BBC?
Oh, because you wouldn't get the freedom. In the late 60s, 70s, beginning of the 80s. That was the best time because the BBC was run by people with real personality who loved the medium, and they were operating out of confidence. Then John Burt came in and said, if we don't match the listening or viewing figures that the commercial channels are getting, we'll get our license revoked. So then they started going for the biggest audiences, and they tended to go for the lowest common denominator, while always denying that they were doing. But it means, and I believe this, that basically in Britain we've gone from what was a middle-class culture with all its failings to a tabloid culture.
This is such a strange argument because I've noticed that whenever a left-wing person challenges the views of a bigoted person, or criticises them, or asks a grifter to justify their position, you know, things like that, and that grifter just happens to be working class, fans of said grifter will, instead of arguing any points that you've raised, will come along and say, why do you hate the working class so much? Why do you lefties always attack the working class? And you're like, mate, I'm just asking this person a question. It's literally got nothing to do with class. And then their non-argument falls apart completely. But the point is that here is John Cleese saying that he preferred it when TV was more middle class, right? And dumbing down for the working class is wrong. And Dan Wootton doesn't challenge him on this whatsoever. I know that what I'm about to say is a poor method that people like Darren Grimes use when they can't argue someone's point. But I'm actually going to use the same method that he uses because I think it's relevant here and it actually does make a good point. Okay, you ready? You sit down for this, right? Imagine if someone of the opposite political persuasion to a grifter said exactly what John Cleese said about the working class. There would be uproar, wouldn't there? Imagine if a left-wing, a woke person said, well, I preferred it when things were more middle class, actually. You would not hear the end of it from GV News grifters, would you? Ever. Here we are, John Cleese is saying exactly that, and Pantomime Hitler next to him isn't saying a fucking word about it.
Of course, the BBC in recent years has even started to censor or offer trigger warnings on old episodes of Fawlty Towers, so I think what you're saying is correct.
There's a huge argument about wokery, and some of it springs from a very good idea, which is let's try to be kind to people. But I believe it's become far too dominated by people who are frightened of offending people. And I think you have to allow offence. And you say, well, do you want people to be shouting racial epithets at people? And the answer is no, but I don't think prison is a correct sanction. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, it's true. There are nowadays some warnings before shows from the past that state there may be some racial terminology in this show which some people might find offensive, and the younger generation who might not be used to blatant racism might say to that, well, thank you very much for the heads up. I think that's a good thing. Also, now I can't complain about this content because I've been warned in advance, and if I want, I can actually avoid this content and not get annoyed by it. And also, this is quite clever because it covers your back as a broadcaster. It's a very sensible thing to do. In fact, it's impossible to get angry about your very polite warning about what's coming up in this program. Do you know what? Let's all go about our business like normal human beings. Okay, bye. However, John Cleese has joined the world of the grifter, and therefore he must be upset by trigger warnings on old TV shows, and therefore has leapt from saying warnings are bad to, oh, you're going to end up in jail at this rate. And that is where this bit ends, because I don't think he knows what he's on about there, and it makes no sense, and he fails to explain himself, and I'm going to use the he's an old man card here and let him off for this one thing, because that was just a ramble. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Do you want people to be shouting racial epithets at people? The answer is no, but I don't think prison is a correct sanction. Do you see what I mean?
John Cleese admits that he hates people who shout racial epithets, right? But fails to note that Fawlty Towers had racism in the form of his character, Basil Fawlty's relationship with the Spanish waiter Manuel, the major in the episode about the Germans who literally shouts racial epithets for like half an episode, and Basil Fawlty, right, in the same episode being terrified of a doctor simply because that doctor is black. He flinches away from him, he's scared, he doesn't want to go anywhere near him, right? To people who love defending racism, these things are fine, because Fawlty Towers was from the past, wasn't it? Which isn't now, it's in the past, isn't it, right? And people had different attitudes back then, so it's best that we don't address these attitudes now. Let's just ignore it all, for some reason. If trigger warnings are there to stop the easily offended, woke people from becoming offended, then why do people who defend racism get so easily offended by the existence of trigger warnings? Also, when you consider that movies and TV shows have had ratings for decades, 15, 18, R-rated and so on, why aren't these same people getting upset by that type of viewer guidance? It's exactly the same, right? GB News viewers are never consistent with their snowflakery.
So you say, well, do you want people to be shouting racial epithets at people? The answer is no, but I don't think prison is a correct sanction. Do you see what I mean?
Indeed, it's the tyranny of woke. It's the tyranny of woke.
I mean, the show I'm doing, the Dinosaur Hour, the show I'm doing for GB News, that will deal with those kind of things. But I don't see that would be relevant to a small bijou hotel that's run in the Caribbean. So they are assuming, with no evidence at all, that they know what the show's going to be like and condemning it for that. And that is neither criticism nor journalism.
What a fucking surprise that is. John Cleese's revolutionary, innovative, completely different and unique GB News show is indeed going to be the same as every other fucking show on GB News. Well, knock me down with a feather. Bum my arse and call me Shirley. What a surprise, eh? You can see why journalists made that amazingly massive leap that Fawlty Towers could possibly be, the new Fawlty Towers could possibly be a anti-woke nightmare on the basis of John Cleese being a whining wanker who has this pretend victimhood thing going on, because that's who he is now, unfortunately. And it's embarrassing to see a hero act like that and resort to this. And it's almost as if he's never heard the phrase, always look on the bright side of life. He's basically the exact opposite of that. And the gall of John Cleese to talk to Dan Wooten, of all people, and then accuse other folks of being poor journalists. That is really taking a piss directly to your face as well. John Cleese is almost a parody of the anti-woke brigade sort of folks, So it's no wonder that Dan Wooten has a boner under that desk. And do you know who John Cleese's co-host is for this new show he's got coming up? It's none other than Andrew Doyle from GB News' Free Speech Nation, right? A man who loves free speech so much that when you politely ask him on Twitter why he constantly attacks LGBT people, he blocks you. When you say to his Tatiana McGriff character that he came up with, can you write a second joke, he blocks you. Free speech. Free speech nation, guys. You couldn't make it up, except they will, because that is literally their jobs. Ladies and gentlemen, this video is, I'd say, a 90% chance of being the penultimate video on this channel. It largely depends on whether this video is monetized or not. I'll go into these reasons in the future and explain it all later, but there is potentially one other video coming, and the final video, it's a big one, it's a monster, it's absolutely massive. I'm still writing it, it's so big, and that's going to be about another grifter, and that's coming hopefully middle of March, very latest start of April. It's been pushed back a bit because unfortunately I've got to do a lot of overtime because I can't afford to fucking live. So YouTube has been pushed into the background somewhat, but I am still working on it every spare moment I have, and that will be it. That will be the last proper video I make. In the future I'll be going to a slightly different format. I will still be on YouTube, but things will be slightly different, very low key, very lo-fi. You'll find out about that next time you see me. I also will be doing videos in a sense that I'm going to do a thing called ASM Archives, where I show you videos that have long been made private, some of the best stuff I've ever made, revisit that and do sort of like a director's commentary before and after those videos are shown, including the, let's call it a battle between me and TJ Kirk, the Amazing Atheist, where I made him cry once. I'm going to be revisiting that, and the first video, by the way, spoiler alert, is one called Edge. And for the true fans of ASM, you're going to be absolutely creaming your pants, and that one's going to make another return. And so that's it. You can like and subscribe if you want for the big last video. That would be nice if you came along for that. And if you want to throw a bit of money my way in these very tough times, then please give $1 or so to my PayPal account. Or you can join the Patreon, which won't be open for too much longer, but if you do join it, you'll be able to get lots of bonus videos and podcasts that are not available to anyone else. And you can buy me a coffee on Ko-Fi if you wish instead. So until next time, thank you very much for watching, and see you later.